IBNet.com. Look at what a great, lousy job the drive-bys have done in educating the American people on the subject of the debt ceiling. For instance, how many of you realize that we have more than doubled the debt ceiling in just 5 years? In 2006, the debt ceiling was $8.2 trillion. Now, with what's going to end up happening here, the debt ceiling will be raised to $16.7 trillion. It's at $14.3 now. You would think that would qualify as news. And of course, we're still not spending enough money for Obama. You know, we're really being played for a bunch of saps, folks. We left the air, left the program talking about this yesterday in the context of the baseline, the way the budget is working. And I have an even more shocking bit of news today to illustrate the baseline. Let me, for those of you that don't know what the baseline is, how baseline budgeting works, let me give you the real quick explanation of it. When you put together your budget, or if you do one, you take last year's spending and income, and you take a look at it, and you figure out if you spent more than you had, or if you didn't spend more than you had. What did you do with what you had left over? Where did it get spent? If the next budget you prepare has to be smaller because your income's dropped, you start going through items, figuring out where you're going to cut. Your baseline is reality. Your baseline every year is reality. Your baseline is the amount of money you have to start with. That is not how it works in Washington. The baseline budgeting is based on the presumption that every item in the budget will automatically increase between 3 and 10%, depending on what the item is, every year, regardless what happened in the previous year. This is why, for example, at the end of the year, the Agriculture Department starts advertising for food stamp applicants because they want their budget to increase. So they don't look at the reality. It says, you know what? We don't need this much money in this department. We have more money than we need. We don't have as many people needing food stamps as we have food stamps. They don't look at it and then cut back and tell the government, you know what? You can cut us here. They will go out and give away food stamps in order to make sure they get that 3 to 10% increase. But that 3 to 10% increase every year becomes the starting point for every budget negotiation. So, for example, when Obama passes the stimulus bill, another $1 trillion effectively is added to the baseline. No consideration is given to whether or not the money was spent wisely, wasted, effectively, or whatever. It was just spent. And because it was spent, there must be an increase in that line item every year. The way this manifests itself in Washington, the best way I have ever found to illustrate this is to put yourself in a situation where you're going to go buy a new car. You've looked at your budget and you have decided that you can afford the monthly payment on a $40,000 car. So now you go to the showrooms or you go to the internet or you go wherever you look to buy a car. And you find a car you really love for $70,000 that the dealer tells you is on sale, you can get it for $60,000. So you and the family discuss it, and if you're like Washington, what you do is you tell yourself, you know what? Let's get that $70,000 car. that only cost $60, and we will save ourselves $10,000. But you haven't. You have spent $20,000 more than you originally allocated. You originally said, I'm going to go buy a $40,000 car. Then you found one you really liked for $70, on sale for $60. You plop down the $60, which is $20 more than you wanted to spend, and tell yourself you save $10. That's how it works. That's baseline budgeting. That is how a cut or a saving is actually an increase. Now, the best, most accurate illustration of where we are with the current baseline in the United States federal budget, I was sent a note from a legislative director of a member of the House of Representatives. I'm not going to mention the name, nor am I going to mention the state. But trust me, it is a real person, and of course it's a real state, and it's a real legislative director. And here's the note. One final thought to illustrate the absurdity of our baseline, and I'll leave you alone. If Speaker Boehner, now listen to me very carefully, folks, if Speaker Boehner were to propose that we simply freeze all government spending immediately, including mandatory and discretionary, meaning including the entitlements, if we just freeze everything and spend no more this year than we spent last year, the Congressional Budget Office would score that as a $9.5 trillion cut. That's how out of whack the baseline is. $9.5 trillion cut. Remember the $9 trillion figure we used at the end of the program yesterday? That is the cumulative total of automatic baseline increases for the next 10 years. But if there's a simple budget freeze, and of course there's not going to be, this is just an educational exercise. Again, now, this is not what is, it is how it is scored. If the Boehner plan were a simple freeze, we're not going to spend another dime next year beyond what we spent this year, it would equal a $9.5 trillion cut, because the baseline in our budget obviously includes $9.5 trillion of new spending, minimum, over the next 10 years. So this is how, when you hear a proposal reacted to by saying, that's a draconian cut, look at what they're doing to school lunch programs, nothing is ever cut. Folks, you don't need me to tell you. We have doubled the debt limit in 5 years. In 2006, the debt limit was $8.2 trillion. After the razzmatazz that we're going through now is finished and done with, it'll be effectively $16 trillion. We're at $14.3 now, and they're going to bump it up by $2 trillion at some point in the next 2 years. It's going to get there. Of course, the porculus, they're not budgeting for porculus, but per se, but the money that porculus cost is automatically included in next year's budget. It could be for widgets. Whatever they spend it on is not known. It's just, this is why it was so crucial for Obama to get that passed, and Obamacare too, because it ups the baseline. And therefore, the automatic increases are off the charts. And therefore, it's impossible to actually cut and reduce anything. So whatever plan Boehner had to go back to the drawing board with, or anybody, I don't care, Reid, you name it, there's not one penny being cut from anything, the way it's being scored. Now, if there were a budget freeze, and if we didn't spend another dime, in the world of reality, it would be good. But Washington is not reality, and Washington budgeting is unlike any. You think Enron was bad? The way Washington does things is criminal. Those people, we don't have enough jails to put everybody in. So the best illustration yet, we freeze spending. If we did that, we didn't spend one more dime next year over what we've spent this year. People in Washington, the Democrats would say that Boehner is cutting $9.5 trillion. And what they mean is there's $9.5 trillion in the baseline that's authorized to be spent that won't be spent, therefore we're cutting it. Just like you allocate 40 grand for your car. You find one for 70 that you like, it's on sale for 60, and you think, whoa, can't pass this up. So you plop down the 60 and tell yourself you've saved 10 when you've spent 20,000 more than you budgeted. That's how they do it. There are countless other examples on the reverse side of this. Let's say in your home you have enough toilet paper for 6 months. But you look at the newspaper and there's coupons in there and the price of toilet paper, you go out and buy toilet paper for half price. So you say to yourself, man, I'm going to go stock up. Look at what I saved. You didn't save anything. You went out and bought a whole bunch more than you needed. So then you tell yourself that you got a deal, that the unit price was half of what it would normally cost, but you didn't need it. Well, people in Reality Heights, where we live, cannot budget our lives the way Washington does. We can't just assume that next year we're going to have $50,000 more dollars income than we had this year. They do. They are assuming. They're acting out on the premise that the next 10 years, they're automatically, just by sitting there without even passing new legislation, there will be $9.5 trillion spent over the next 10 years. Where is irrelevant right now? That comes later when they start actually doing the budget. The baseline just tells them what they've got to work with. Then, the Appropriations Committee gets in gear and the lobbyists and where the money goes, then that's a whole nother ball of insider wax. But this, when I got this email last night, put this in total perspective. We're sitting here, it's less than chump change what we're talking about. Now, after Speaker Boehner appeared on this program yesterday, then the president goes out there and he starts asking people to call. I'm telling you, that place melted. Washington, once again, the phone lines melted because the American people, they may not understand the specifics of what I just explained, but they know instinctively, just as you do, that this is not how it works, that this is not right, that none of this is making any sense, and you're not buying any longer the fact that the Speaker Boehner even admitted on the program yesterday, Obama gets $1 trillion to spend today, the minute that bill's signed, and we maybe get our $1 trillion in cuts, maybe over 10 years. Which, of course, the maybe over 10 years never happens because this Congress can't commit another Congress 10 years down the line to whatever it does. The Congress 10 years from now will decide what it's going to do with its money. If a person who expects he's going to gain 100 pounds in a year only gains 75, tells himself he lost 25 pounds. That's how it works. Yeah, I lost 25 pounds. Really? You look 75 pounds heavier. Well, I was going to gain 100, but I only gained 75, so I lost 25 pounds. I know some of you hearing this for the first time. No, Rush, you can't possibly know what you're talking about. Sadly, I do. And if it's difficult to understand, it's because it's so outside the realm of reality. So, and we've got the figures here, the CBO baseline numbers for the years 2012 through 2021. For example, the baseline budget for 2021 is 5.7 trillion. It's already it's etched in stone. That's what, as of today, we're going to spend in 2021. The baseline budget's there. That's the automatic increase. That's nothing can be done about that. That's done. I got to take a brief timeout, and we'll be back. And by the way, the increase over 2012 is $2 trillion. So we're committed. We're committed to $2 trillion, almost $3 trillion of additional spending without anybody having a meeting. It's already the law. Back after this.